Everyday Orthodox. I'm Elisa Bielatich-Davis, and we just get together here on Sunday nights to meet everyday Orthodox Christians. I think it's such a beautiful thing to get to know the members of the body of Christ, right? We're meant to be one. We think of our Lord's Prayer in the garden, asking that we all be one as he and his Father are one. That's an amazing idea, right? But it's so hard for us to be one because we're spread out. We don't know each other. We're in different jurisdictions and different regions and worshiping on different calendars, although not right now. We're in that lovely time of year when we're all on the same calendar. It's very nice. But we're spread out. We're very spread out, especially here in North America. So I think real unity is maybe not so much about bishops and hierarchy and administration. Maybe unity is just about getting to know one another and loving one another and really caring about what happens to one another. So here we are. We're just getting together and meeting fascinating Orthodox people from all different walks of life in different jurisdictions, different parts of the world. And maybe that'll help us achieve that goal. So, all right, we are live streaming on ancientfaith.com. We're on the AFR app. We're on the Ancient Faith Ministries Facebook Live, and we're on YouTube. Interesting thing, you can actually see our faces on YouTube, so that's always kind of fun. And also, if you missed this show, we're here every Sunday night. I actually haven't been here for a while. I had a whole month off. It was crazy, but I'm so happy to be back. We'll be here Sunday nights, same time every week. But if you miss a show, you can always listen to us in the archives. So you just go to the app or to YouTube or to ancientfaith.com, and you can find all the old episodes. So there you go. So tonight, I have the joy of introducing you to a friend of mine. So I always enjoy it it's always fun when it's somebody I know already. So Elizabeth, Elizabeth Ayoub. Actually, nowadays she works for Yes, Youth Equipped to Serve, which is, if you're a regular listener, you know all about Yes by now because I talk about it a lot. But it's a ministry of Focus North America, and it's really wonderful. And that's actually how I met Elizabeth. We were both people, we're both moms who sort of got involved with bringing Yes into our parishes and trying to get this organization to help us grow really beautiful young Christians in our parishes. We both do youth ministry work. And so Elizabeth's a stay-at-home mom. She homeschools her 8-year-old in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She also directs the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd program at her parish. She coordinates a homeschool group in her community. She was leading the Teen Soyo Advice. She was the Teen Soyo Advisor for quite a while, but she also worked as a child life specialist in a hospital for years, which, if you know anything, like if you've ever had a kid in the hospital, child life is such a beautiful thing because they come around and just sort of try to remind us that the kids are kids and that they need to play and they need to be happy, and there are all these developmental milestones they still have to hit even when they're in the hospital. So she's done all kinds of neat things, but now she actually works for Yes as the local initiatives coordinator, which is very cool. And so we'll probably ask her a little bit about that. We'll probably talk a little bit about Yes, but Elizabeth's pretty fascinating in her own right, even besides Yes. So I don't know, maybe we won't get to it. We'll see. But Elizabeth, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. It's so much fun. But so tell me, okay, we got to start from the beginning. And I actually don't think I know the answer to this. So it is nice to have people on the show because now I can grill you. Excellent.
Yeah.
Where were you born? Where did you always live in Michigan? Where'd you start?
No. So funnily enough, I was born in Colorado and I lived there for 3 weeks. And then my parents moved, and I've never been back to Colorado after that. So my parents ended up moving to Virginia and then Georgia. And so Georgia is where I spent the great majority of my childhood from the time I was 3 until I graduated from high school.
Oh,
yeah. So that's where
in the city,
right.
like in Atlanta or somewhere small? Where were you?
Like the suburbs of Atlanta. So we were about 45 minutes outside of Atlanta in a little town. It was a wonderful, wonderful childhood.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's lovely. Now, growing up, were you Orthodox or were you weren't, right?
No, my parents were both Christian Reformed. So my dad is from Michigan, my mom is from Wisconsin, and they were both Christian Reformed, ended up both working in Florida and met there at the Christian Reformed Church, and then had their whole story of, marrying, moving, having children. And when I was 6, my mom had been doing a lot of research into the faith and sought out orthodoxy. And so my family got chrismated when I was 6 years old. So I don't really remember anything about being Christian reformed, but I'm so grateful to my parents for doing the work of searching out for orthodoxy and finding it and then gifting it to me and all of my siblings, because I have a lot of friends who are converting now, and it's a lot of work and it's a lot of changes. So I'm very grateful to my parents that they did that work for me and for my family.
It really is true. When you convert as an adult, you kind of, it's like weeding a garden or something. You're going back through your brain
Hmm.
and finding like, oh, I'm thinking about that wrong. And now I'm thinking about that wrong. And like, it's a lot. I feel like it took me like 10 or 15 years before I could really, uproot, because I didn't even know that I was thinking things that didn't make sense in the big picture of
Right,
orthodoxy.
right, exactly. Yeah, it definitely takes a while.
It's a task. So that's lucky to be able to do that at 6. And did you guys just kind of, I've seen, with when families come in together, you often see the kids usually just like fold right in, no problem. The kids are like, oh yeah, I'll kiss that icon. Give me a candle. Let's go. And they make a couple friends and they're having a blast. And it's like, there's like no weirdness about switching at all. Is that how it was for you?
Yeah, yeah. I really have no recollection of life before Orthodoxy. So, yeah, I ended up going to three different parishes within the Atlanta metro area over my time living there, and had some really beautiful experiences. Got connected with the Antiochian village camp while I was there, and got to go as a camper and then later as a counselor.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's neat. That's really neat. Yeah, that's interesting. It's always interesting to me because when I first came into the church is 1998, and people would always talk about cradle versus convert, like people who were
Mhm.
born in the church and people who converted. And now, like, what do you even call the kids who's like parents or grandparents? Yeah, I was at a church this weekend. There were a bunch of people who came in, like with Father Peter Gilchrist, right? They were actually Father
Mhm.
John Brahm's family, and they have great grandchildren now. And it's like, well, those are cradle Orthodox generations, but they're American Orthodox.
Mhm.
That's it. We're culturally American Orthodox, and that's a thing now. And it's so cool.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's beautiful that your parents did that. Was that hard for their families? It seems, I mean, I would assume your grandparents and everybody else was Christian Reformed.
Yes. And yeah, I think it was harder for my dad's parents than my mom's parents. My mom's parents were a little bit more open to that and they would come to church with us. But yeah, I think that's hard. I mean, God forbid if my daughter ever left the faith, like that would be hard for me. So I can only imagine for them, like seeing, Christian Reformed was very important to them. And so to see my mom and my dad choose something else, I feel like that would be a little hard.
I think so. And it's reasonable. Like, we get mad
Hmm.
about it, but it's like, listen, you don't want your kids it's just going to be weird for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so you got to go to Antiochian Village Camp. And I mean, that's kind of like, for those of you who are not fascinated with national camp statistics, this is like the jewel of American summer camps. I mean, it's,
Hmm.
it's a permanent camp. They have a staff year round. They do adult camps, because I always said, people were like, Elisa likes to work with youth ministry. And I was like, well, actually, I like to work with camp. And so, like, if old people would come to camp, I would do it. Like, I'd do a senior citizen camp. I'd do whatever.
Hmm.
And as it turns out, they do stuff like that there.
Hmm.
But so you, of course,
Yes.
went to summer camp as a kid and then
Hmm.
as a camper and then also as a counselor. Tell us a little bit. What is so special about this camp? What's such a big deal?
So I was there as a camper for 3 years, and then I was a counselor in training for a year, and then I was a counselor for 2 summers. And um, one of the things is that because it's a permanent camp, they're able to have 4 2-week sessions. And then obviously the counselors are there longer than that to have training beforehand
Or
and time after to so you're
oh,
there for
that's
like
cool.
9.5 to 10 weeks. So I think one of the things that as a
Wow.
counselor that makes it really special is that you have a long time to develop those relationships with the other counselors. And so counselors that I was on staff with back in 2003, 2004, we're still friends. I'm godparents to some of their children, and we still see each other. Now they also have family camp at the Antiochian Village over Memorial Day weekend. And so now we all meet back up and we bring our kids and drop them off at camp. And so I think that is one of the things that really helped form the connections between the counselors and then it's just a gift for the kids to be able to meet so many people. Like the whole point of your podcast, like to meet so many different people who are Orthodox all across the country and realize that it's not just something in their own community, but it's everywhere. So I think that's really beautiful. My daughter gets to go for the first time for summer camp this year, and I'm really excited.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah, I'm jealous. That's the neatest
Mhm.
summer camp, I think. Well, and St. Raphael, you have a saint's relics there. That it's just,
Mhm.
there's just a lot to love about that. And I love Antiochian Village. So that's so cool. All right. So,
Yeah, I.
well, I was just going to say 10 days, like as a young adult, right? Like college students, young adults, 10 weeks. I mean, what a great thing too, because you've got all these great priests around and you've got like all of these sort of advisors around. And so I would just imagine that it would be so helpful for the counselors to just kind of like feel like you know who you are, you know what your faith is, you know what you're doing. Did you find that there were like conversations with people at camp that really sort of carried you through the year, like helped kind of solidify you while you were in college? Or am I just over romanticizing it?
I mean, it's probably over romanticizing a little bit, but I mean, I think that those relationships really helped. I was fortunate because I graduated right before I turned 18. And then at 18, I was old enough to be a counselor. I was a counselor the summer before I started college. And I think that made a really big impact on me of like having that foundation and those friends as I went out on my own to college and started having a lot more outside influences that I hadn't had before, that I had all those friendships, I had those priests I could call to really rely on. And then I think I was able to do things like college conference and real break, where I got to go back and connect with those friends throughout the year, because I do think there is something of like where you get your boost from camp and it carries you for like 5 or 6 months, and then you're starting to feel a little like, who am I? What am I doing in college? Like, where is this? And then you get to go back to like college conference or something like real break and get rejuvenated to go back into your everyday life to to carry the gospel with you wherever you go. So
That's so neat. Well, and you're right. I mean, for younger kids, it really starts out just sort of being this amazing, like there are Orthodox people all over this country. Like just because you're the only one at your school does not mean
mhm,
there aren't any other ones, right? So that already is something. And then of course with OCF, a lot of kids, like, kids who grew up in a Greek church or an Antiochian church, they may not have ever met like Coptic kids or Russian kids.
mhm,
Like all of a sudden they all get mixed in. But I do think it's a really important and a good thing when you're younger, but when you're going into college, to be able to have that space where you come back and you kind of touch base and you're
mhm,
reminded why you're Orthodox and why this matters. And
mhm.
it's important. It's really beautiful. And as adults, it would be nice if we had more things like that. I think
I agree.
every Sunday. So if we're paying attention, we do have it, but it
Mhm.
wouldn't be bad to have camp too. I would love to be doing the family camp and stuff. That's neat. That's really neat. But okay, so what'd you end up doing in college? Like, what were you studying in college? And were you still around Atlanta, or did you just like go crazy and break out and go somewhere else?
I did go crazy. So my my parents decided right when I was graduating high school that they were going to move back from Georgia to Wisconsin and live near my mom's parents. So I started looking at colleges in the Midwest versus Georgia, just like the idea that how would I get back and forth between college and home would be really hard. So I looked at colleges in the Midwest, and I ended up going to the College of St. Benedict and St. Thomas or St. John University in St. Cloud, Minnesota, or in St. Joseph in Minnesota. And I started out, there's a lot of saints there.
That's true.
I started out studying chemistry, and then I got into chemistry class and I realized that was a very bad decision. And then I switched to psychology, and that was a really wonderful decision. But as I was getting near the end of my my college career, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, because I really wasn't that keen on going back to grad school, but there's not a ton you can do with a psychology major without going to grad school. And my dear friend, Kriya Daly, mentioned this career child life specialist. And I was like, oh, what's that? And so, honestly, just like having one conversation with her, I started researching it. I went and talked to my college advisor, and he was like, oh, I've never heard of that. You can't do that. Um, This is extremely helpful
Not a thing.
advisor.
Not a thing.
But so I had to research it all on my own. But so yeah, I studied psychology in college, and I had a lot of other really amazing experiences in college. But also realized that the snow doesn't melt. The first time it snowed, because coming from Georgia, the first time it snowed, I asked my roommates, I was like, when is the snow going to melt? And they were like, in April. I was not prepared for that.
That's
So
hilarious.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
I learned a lot
you're
in
good at
college.
dusting in snow, and then it goes away.
Exactly.
Like, that was nice. We all took pictures of our yards. That's great.
Yes.
That's really funny. That is very funny. I forgot that we know Coriazora in
Yes, I forgot you would know her now too. Yes.
she's wonderful, yeah. But okay, so child life specialist, for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about it. I happen to be lucky enough to have had kids in the hospital lots of times. So I've spent a lot of time with child life specialists, and it really is, if first of all, it's real, unlike, your advisor was wrong, but it's a real job, and it's actually like really very beautiful. It's neat.
hmm It is beautiful. I think that a lot of people might not know about it just because it is kind of like a more niche field. Like there's just not a ton of jobs available. And so, but I think more people are becoming aware of it. But the basic premise of a child life specialist is that they're there to help with the psychosocial coping of children while they're in the hospital or other like medical environment. Um, and so it looks very different in practice depending on where you are in the hospital. So, for example, when I worked in outpatient areas like emergency or radiology, a lot of what I'd be doing is preparing kids for procedures, like helping explain in kid-friendly terms, like
Mhm.
what it's going to be like to get an IV placed, or what it's going to be like to go and have a CAT scan or an MRI, and really helping support kids to be able to do these things without requiring sedation. We're using other methods to be able to help them be able to cope with the experience. And then when I worked inpatient, I worked in the like nephrology unit, I worked in the pediatric intensive care unit. And a lot of those are more about like teaching kids about their disease or their illness and how to cope with that, as well as all the procedures that go with it, as well as the hospitalization part of it, trying to make it, like you said, like a more welcoming experience for them to feel comfortable and let them be kids. So everywhere from playing all the way to up in that intensive care unit, a lot of times we had really tragic or sad stories of kids who ended up dying. And so being able to support families through the death of their child and being able to teach brothers and sisters about what was happening and help them be able to come and say goodbye to their sibling as well. So the child life specialist is like one term that like covers a whole gamut of different things that you might be doing on any given day. That was a really beautiful job. I was blessed to be able to do that for almost 10 years. And I love it. And then I also taught briefly a few child life courses at a university near me as well. So,
Nice.
yeah.
So all of this was Michigan, Wisconsin. Where was this?
I did my internship and I worked briefly at the Children's Hospital of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. And then after that was done, I ended up moving to Grand Rapids. And then I worked at Helen DeVos for a long time.
Nice. Very
Yeah.
nice. So where along this story is it that you met your husband? And how did
I met him when I was looking for a job. So,
really?
funnily enough, I had told people that I was never going to live in Michigan, which is, I feel like there's so many things in my life where I was like, told God or told somebody that I was never going to do something. And then, like,
Mm,
here I am doing it. But I was applying for jobs all over, definitely like warmer areas, like California, South Carolina. I was applying for jobs all over, warm places, not Michigan, too cold. I'm never going to go there. And oh my gosh, Father Raphael and Zaray Curry Zaray are going to come back up in the story. They had a big influence in my life. But so my mom was going to the Parish Life Conference in Grand Rapids, and right while I was applying for jobs, and she was chaperoning the teens, and she said, "Why don't you come along with me?" And I was like, "All right, sure." And so this is where Father Raphael and Korea Zaray lived. And so I ended up hanging out with them. We were camp counselors together. That's how I knew them. And so hanging out with them, they're like, "You should meet this guy." And I was like, no, not really that interested in meeting a guy right now. But they did end up introducing me to him, and we stayed up talking till 3 o'clock in the morning. The first night that we met, and we've never stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning ever again, intentionally. But so yes, so we met at a Parish Life Conference. So cliche. But yeah, so that is then I went home and looked, are there any jobs available in Grand Rapids, Michigan? And lo and behold, there was. And so I
Oh
applied
my
for it.
goodness.
And then the next day, my husband messaged me. He was like, hey, I know you're looking for a job. There's a job available in Grand Rapids right now if you want to apply.
You're
I did
both
not tell him,
looking at
like,
the
oh, I
same
already
time.
applied for it.
He's like, well, I mean, because there's always just like the one children's hospital in town, right? Like,
Right,
so
yes.
that's adorable though, that the next day you're both online looking at like child life specialists.
So how do we get near each other? So, yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's neat. That's really neat. What was he doing in Grand Rapids?
He was a lawyer, and so he was working at a law firm in Grand Rapids. And so yeah.
That's awesome. That's so lovely. Okay. So the two of you met. How long did it take before you got married? I feel like when within 48 hours, you're already looking for how to move to town. I feel like that's not going to take a long time. Like, I feel like you had a good idea that this was it.
Yes, I mean, I was pretty sure right away. We dated for about a year, and then we were engaged for about like 6 to 9 months. So yeah, within 2 years we were
It's
married.
like the
So
most reasonable minimum amount of time possible.
yeah,
Like
exactly. Who needs a long engagement?
reasonable
No.
response. Yeah. Yeah. No,
Hmm.
that's really cool. And you knew that you wanted to have kids, or did you think no way? Well, you're a
We
child life
definitely,
specialist. You probably
yeah.
were like, yeah, I gotta have kids.
Yeah, I've worked in youth ministry and been involved with children since I was a child. And so yeah, of course, I always wanted to have kids. So we, wanted to ease into that. But then it ended up that we had infertility. And so we had two miscarriages and did a lot of, growing together and trying to figure things out before we were married for about 5 years before we were blessed with our daughter.
Well, thank God though that you grew together, right? I mean, that's a hard thing to do, honestly.
Hmm.
It's a really big, there are certain things that are really tremendous challenges for a marriage. And I
Hmm.
really feel like both infertility and miscarriage in their own right
Hmm.
are maybe two of the hardest things to get through. What kind of support did you have going through that? Did you find a lot of support at the church? Did you find it at work? Because I think so often we don't tell people, right? So nobody knows
Yes.
to support us.
Yes, I know. I do feel like I kept it pretty private, but I feel like I try to be a little bit more outspoken about it now because I want other women, if they're going through that, to feel like they can talk about it. Because, yeah, it did feel like it was a little bit hard to bring up to people because you don't want to make somebody else feel bad. Like, that's not what you're. I'm not trying to go around like making your day bad, but I had a good friend at work who had gone through a similar thing, and so we were really good support for each other. So that was really helpful. I think the overall Orthodox faith was really helpful to me during that, but I do think it was hard at church because I do think a lot of people were like, "Oh, so when are you guys going to have kids?" And, everybody around us is having babies. And so honestly, I feel like the actual practical part of being at church was sometimes hard. I remember a Mother's Day or two where I went to a different Orthodox church in town because I just didn't want to have people, making awkward comments like, "You're gonna have a kid soon," when they don't, what I mean, they didn't know, and it was that
They
not
don't know, but
knowing.
it's stupid. It's dumb because
Yes.
the truth is like, well, actually, I mean, we do know about more miscarriages now, right? Because we have
Hmm.
tests so that we can do a home test. You don't wait till like you've missed your third period and then the doctor like tells you that the rabbit died or something. Like this is like, oh, the day before your period's due, you can
Right.
test and you'll know. So unfortunately, we are well aware of
Hmm.
miscarriages that we might not have known about. So maybe we have more than the generations before us. But it is true that people feel very free to just go on and on about how you should have babies. And I see it at church sometimes. There's like a whole group of young couples, and several of them have children, and then some of them don't. And
Hmm.
they get a lot of. I just wince for them every time because it's like I don't
Yeah,
know. Maybe they don't want kids, or maybe they really do, and this is just like grinding salt into their wounds. I don't know. But yeah.
exactly.
No, I had a miscarriage as well, but I do think um, it's a very difficult experience, and it is a
Hmm.
shame that it's always so quiet because people don't generally know about it. And so often, when people say, "Well, we're going to wait till the second trimester to tell anyone in case something goes wrong," and I'm just always like, you might think about who are you going to need if something
Right.
goes wrong. That, like, tell
Hmm.
those people, tell those
Yes.
beautiful people who are going to take care of you, but
Yes. And I feel like because I've made my story like more public and more open, I have been graced with people who felt comfortable like reaching out to me and letting me know that they had a miscarriage and being able to support other people. So I am really grateful, even though going through infertility was extremely difficult. I am grateful that now I have that ability to empathize and understand it a little bit more and be a support for other women and dads who are going through that. So.
it is a beautiful thing. It really is. It was interesting when I had a son who passed away from SIDS, and at church, all of a sudden, there are all of these older women who are coming, and they're like, "Oh, I had a child who died of SIDS, and I had it,"
Mm.
and it's like we have all of these invisible griefs, and you do have to. Not that you want to talk about it all the time or make a big deal of it, but you do kind of want people to know that you've gone through it
Mhm.
because people feel so alone,
Mhm.
But yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm sorry that you guys went through that, but it sounds like you were able to go through it really together. Is that right?
Mhm.
Is it? Because a lot of times that's hard to do, right? Because the experience is different for both of you.
Yeah, I think that there were definitely hard times where, yeah, it fixes differently because, the woman has the like physical and the emotional and the, all of that. Whereas for the man, he doesn't have the physical experience and just it's different. So I think sometimes it was hard on our marriage, but ultimately, yes, like being able to pray together and, work together and, come to the same ability, like I feel like along the way, being able to pray the same prayer and desire the same thing was really helpful. And we didn't always have that. And then we've had secondary infertility after our daughter. And so for a long time, there was that kind of question of like, should we, what should we do? Like, should we keep trying? Like, do we keep trying? Do we stop? What do we do? And ultimately, like, we both kind of came to the prayer of like, instead of being like, God, please give us more kids, the prayer became, God, please let us be content with what you've given us. And so I was really grateful when we were both able to have that prayer and both be in agreement about that.
That is very beautiful. It is. It's hard to come to that place, but it's so nice to have the peace once you
Mhm.
get there.
It is. It is. It is. It's a hard
It's
journey.
like, oh, like let me. Maybe
Hmm.
that's the prayer, right? Like, Lord, let me want what you want, right? Like, let me
Hmm.
embrace your
Yes.
will and be okay with your will. And it's like, once we do that, life is so much easier. But
Yes.
all right. Well, so we are going to take a short break. We'll be right back with more Everyday Orthodox. We'll see you in just 1 second.
The colors of the liturgy adorn the church for all to see. What colors are highlighted in the church this week, and what colors might you see in 2 weeks' time? Through memorable rhythm, discover the colors that change throughout our liturgical year. Because for every feast and every season, each color has a reason. Today My Priest Wears White by Laura Pavlik, available for kids now at store.ancientfaith.com. Again, that is store.ancientfaith.com.
Welcome back to Everyday Orthodox. We're here tonight with my friend Elizabeth Ayoub. And so we just got to the part in the story where you had your wonderful daughter. And so did you know, like from the start, you were going to stay home and you were going to homeschool? And were you, like, did you have it all planned out? Or was this something that you had to work out as you were going through it?
Well, I am a planner, but um, I started out, so I had been working full time until she was born. And then I went to part time afterwards, and I worked part time for about a year. And then I was just finding that extremely unmanageable with childcare and trying to work and trying to figure out childcare. And also, I really just loved being with her and being at home. So ultimately, about a year after, I decided to stay home with her. Um, I was homeschooled all the way through from kindergarten all the way until I graduated high school.
Oh,
So my mom had previously been a high school English teacher. And when I was, kindergarten age, the public schools in our area at the time were not very good. And so my mom started looking at other options, and she ended up being one of those pioneers of homeschooling back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I don't know how she did it. I'm so amazed because now I have so many resources online and all over the place. I have a million homeschooling resources available at my fingertips, but she did not. And she figured it out, and she homeschooled me and all of my four brothers and sisters all the way through high school. And so I loved being homeschooled. I was really grateful for that gift, but I never really thought that I was going to homeschool my daughter. But I loved child development from being in college and studying psychology, and then being a child life specialist and studying child development and actually helping like kids, putting it into practice and seeing the different ages and stages, having my own like case study of one at home, like with child development. Like that was amazing. And I loved that. And so then as I'm like studying child development, ages 2 and 3 and 4, and then I'm like, oh, what happens after that? Oh, that's when they start becoming educated, and you get to teach them all the things like math and reading and all of those things. I just was falling more and more in love with it. And so talked with my husband, and we ended up deciding to homeschool as well.
oh, that's neat. Wow, your mom really was kind of a pioneer of it, because I know even probably 10 years before you started, it was people had to like really search for the curriculum, and you had to find these like random Facebook groups where somebody was talking about it to get information. And now it's kind of like Orthodox stuff too. Like, finding Orthodox materials in English used to be so hard, and now it's just so easy.
It is. Yeah. It's amazing how it like grows and develops. So
That's wonderful. So how did you get started homeschooling? I guess you just knew all about all the curriculum and all the stuff, and you could find it all online. Was it like, did you agonize to figure out like what curriculum, or was it no problem, or what? How do you decide that stuff?
it took me a little while. So when she was younger, in her younger years, like 3, 4, preschool age, I was really attracted to the Montessori method of education. Maria Montessori, probably familiar with that. I also really loved a lot of things in like the Waldorf pedagogy as well. And I still love those things. I feel like they're really helpful for the younger years. Catechesis of the Good Shepherd that I help do at our church is based on the Montessori method. And so I have like a strong love for that still. But as she started getting a little bit older, I was like, this is not really going to work with my style or her style. So I did a little bit of more research and really came to love a lot about the classical. And then within classical, Charlotte Mason was an educator in England in the 1800s, and really fell in love with her. And so I studied a lot, I researched a lot. I'm a researcher. I read a ton of books, read a lot of articles, watched a lot of YouTube videos, did all the things. And there's actually a free Charlotte Mason curriculum called Ambleside Online that is, these women put their heart and soul, is group of women put their heart and soul into creating this free curriculum. So obviously it's a lot of like book lists and explanations of how to do the Charlotte Mason thing, but you still have to go and buy like the books and the materials themselves. But the actual, like, we've laid out 12 years of education is all there, just gifted to you. So we primarily use Ambleside Online, and then yeah, it's amazing. And then my old camp counselor and a friend of hers actually wrote a book called Patterns for Life, and it's about Charlotte Mason and orthodoxy. So that was like really beautiful. I highly recommend that book. And so that was really, that kind of confirmed my choice of like, I chose that method of education before this book came out, but then it was like, oh, I love seeing how the two really go hand in hand together really well.
Oh, that's neat. That's very cool. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So then, and your daughter just wanted to be homeschooled, and you two get along really well, and it wasn't a problem at all. Because like,
we never argue ever.
I have some kids I could homeschool, and I have some kids I could not homeschool because they would.
Yes.
They would just, like, if anybody else told them to do it, they would. But if I tell them I can't, you could find a way, right? But it would have to be like the assignments would come from the program instead of here or something.
Yeah,
how did you work through that?
yeah, I think even, reflecting on back on myself being homeschooled, there were times like we had friction, like my mom and I had friction, and there's definitely times my daughter and I have friction. I think that, um, because you're not just teaching your child math and reading, you're teaching them habits and virtues and helping build their character all day, every day. And so it can be challenging and exhausting, all of that. But
Mm.
I think people always like to ask, like, how long are you going to homeschool? I'm like, it's funny that people never say, how long are you going to send your children to school? But they do always ask, like, how long you're going to homeschool. And so I always answer that I will homeschool as long as my daughter's thriving and I'm thriving. I truly believe that anybody who wants to in this day and age could be capable of homeschooling their child, if that was what they were wanting to. There's so many resources and so much support available out there. But I think you really have to want to, and you have to see that it's like having a good effect on you and on your children. So we have some hard days, but we apologize and forgive each other and get back to the math lesson or geography or whatever it is.
That's a lesson too. Here's how to handle friction. Here's how to apologize when you say the wrong thing. Like that's part of raising a good human being. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's neat. So, all right. So you're homeschooling. Actually, I'm curious. At what point in this story did you get to know the yes stuff? Because that started for you. Were you still in high school? Like, were you a teenager?
No,
doing that?
I never got to be a part of Yes as a teenager. But my husband and so I was for the Antiochian Archdiocese, I was the diocesan youth advisor for the Midwest for several years, and then my husband and I were.
That's a big job, Elizabeth.
Yes, it was a big job.
That's a good do. That's cool.
Yes. And then at the same time, my husband and I were also the local teen advisors at our actual parish as well. And so I was friends with Katrina Batar, who was running the Yes program. And so we were chatting, and so we decided to bring Yes to our teens at our church. And my husband and I were both blown away. I mean, it was a great experience for the teenagers too, don't get me wrong. But my husband and I were both like, whoa, this is a teen service project was the most amazing thing. I mean, I've been a member of Teen Soy at my parish since I was 13 and been on tons of service projects over my life, and none of them transformed my view of serving others and being with others the way that Youth Equipped to Serve did. And so we just fell in love with it, and we brought her back another year, and then it really brought in the idea of service into our parish, and that just kept growing as well. So that has been a beautiful gift. But then, fast forward like 10 years later, I hadn't been doing that much with Yes, but then I was on the advisory board for Yes, and then about a year and a half ago, started working part-time for Yes as well.
That's so great. Okay, so tell me, what is it that to you was different from just because we say, oh, it's a service day, it's a service project, and it's like and sometimes we do that, right? We'll take we should take the teens to go like clean the yards of the elderly people in the parish, or to go visit a nursing home, or whatever it is, go out and talk to people on the street. What is it that Yes does that is different from just doing a project?
I think there's two main things I'll start with. One is that I really think that they work hard on framing the experience. So like preparing and helping you think about what it is that you're doing when you serve. And really the idea that it's living out the gospel, but what does that mean? How do you take down stereotypes? How do you go from a mentality of like, I'm here to fix you or help you, and really I'm here to serve you and to be open to whatever God wants for me and for you in this moment. And then, so I think that preparation, that framing of the experience, the framing of how we live our life, and then afterwards also like debriefing and helping you reflect on it and think about what happened when you were with those other people, and how can you take that to keep growing as you serve others. So that kind of like whole framework of it, but then also just the ability to be with other people. So formerly on service projects, it'd be a lot of like, oh, we're going to go and like give this activity to you, or we're going to go and give this clothing to you. And it's very much of like I'm doing this to you, or I'm doing this for you, instead of I'm being with you. And so that's really what Yes is about, is like helping you be with somebody. And a lot of times, yes, it is somebody who's very different from you, or somebody who's in a hard circumstance in their life, whether it's somebody who's living on the streets, or somebody with mental illness, or whether that, like, we intentionally go out and like be with people in those situations, but it's also teaching you how to just be with people in a loving way everywhere, at coffee hour, at school, at work, wherever it is. So I kind of like the whole goal of Yes is to transform your whole life. It's not just a one day, like, let's go out and love people, but like, let's go out every day and love people, even when it's hard.
Well, and it is beautiful, because I do think at the end of the experience, it's not just like, okay, I'm going to go help people who are hungry all the time now, or I'm going to go repeat this project that we did again and again, right?
Right.
Instead, it's you're exactly right. It's like forming your heart for the way that you encounter the world, so that you show them that, like, you, every day, everywhere you go, you can be this person who is serving and paying attention and noticing people and sitting with them where they are. And, different people have different needs, and you can be there for all those different kinds of people with all their different kinds of, if they're lonely, or they're whatever, frustrated or tired or hungry or whatever the thing is. Yeah, it's beautiful. But you're right. I think a lot of it's really just framing, right? Because you're not doing things differently than a person might in just about any kind of service work. But it's really about really first stopping and thinking about, like, why are we doing this? How do you do this intentionally? How are you going to be present? And then at the end, well, what happened? Did you feel something when you were serving that person? Like, what was happening in your heart when this was happening? And so just sort of pointing out to them so they see the benefits of what they've just done. It's so intentional, and it's so beautiful. It's neat. It's really neat. But so you were doing stuff with your Sunday school, because I know you sort of adapted some Yes stuff for your Sunday school class. You had a really cool idea. You were like offering different kinds of classes and letting the kids pick what kind of class they wanted. Tell me about that.
So that was for our Soyo aged kids. So for those of you not in the Antiochian, that's like our 7th through 12th grade. And so when I was the church school director at my church, I had this feeling of, when adolescents are getting to that age developmentally, with all my experience with child development, they really are starting to develop their own interests in what things are interesting them. So I felt a little bit unsure of whether it was the best to just plug students into whatever, the topic this year is just going to be like, the history of the church. And if you had a big group of kids that weren't really that into history, and that wasn't something that was engaging them, how much were they going to actually want to be engaged in church school? How much were they going to want to be coming? So I had this idea of, instead of assigning kids to classes, that we would offer 2 or 3 different classes and let the students choose. So got teachers for a couple different options of classes. And then I called all of the adolescent students and asked them what class they wanted to be in before the church school year started. And so that was really a really cool experience. So like the first year we offered a service and faith one based on the Yes curriculum. And then we also offered an iconography class. And then we did also just offer church history. And so that was so cool to me to get to see, like the kids who are super artsy went to the iconography class, and like they were able to kind of, like, the thing that draws me to the church is what I get to study about this year. That doesn't always work practically, because some years you don't have as many teachers available. You don't always have as many students, who are coming on a regular basis. So then after we did that for 2 years, where they got to choose what class they were. And then after that, I moved into, instead of, we didn't have enough of all of those resources to offer multiple classes. What we did instead was we offered 1 year, but throughout the year, we split it up. So there were a couple different teachers throughout the year. So we started with a more like Bible study for the first like trimester. And then the next trimester, we went into preparing for the Creative Arts Festival. So we had a woman who is an iconographer at our church. She came in and talked about beauty in the church and helped them create this like amazing project around the Theotokos. And so while some kids might still be in a class at some point that wasn't their like main interest, they got to kind of sample a couple different things, have connections with different adults within the parish that they might not have had connections with before. So that is still how our church school for the teenagers is set up to this day, where they do a couple different things throughout the year and get to have connections with different adults in our parish.
That's really neat. We just moved to a new building, and I'm trying to think, where would they let the kids paint icons? And I don't think they would right now. But in a couple of years, when it's a little more beat up, I bet you think we could get that going.
Yes.
Right now, they would all be so mad at me for even thinking of it. But
shiny new church.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so you were saying that you and I have been on the board. Maybe have you been on the board since the beginning?
I don't think so, but it's been a minute. I want to say like
on like a year
6 years. Yeah, maybe. How long have you been on?
I think I was on the first board. I don't know. I think
Okay,
so.
I don't know. All the years start to blur together.
I know. It's been a really long time. And Katrina will be like, well, they're 3-year terms. I'm like, oh, am I supposed to leave? And she's like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Hopefully the deed will let me stay around too. But so what are you doing now? Like, what is the job that you have? What is this?
So I am the local initiatives coordinator, and the local initiatives part of YES is relatively new. We're still only like 1.5 to 2 years old. But what we were starting to realize is, so Youth Equipped to Serve is a youth organization to help support youth in equipping them to go out and serve, if you didn't catch that from the name. And it is part of Focus North America. And what we were realizing as we continued to work with youth is that one way to really help youth be able to serve is to have them be in a parish that is really good at serving as well. Because if we teach all these youth to serve and go out and love others as Christ does, but nobody else in their parish is doing it, it's going to be really hard for that to be sustainable. And so local initiatives was born out of this idea of, let's encourage parishes and groups within parishes to serve well and help them with all the resources that they might need to find ministries. And, that's a big barrier for some parishes, is like not knowing, like, where can we even serve? Who takes volunteers? What requirements are there? So that's how local initiatives was kind of evolved out of that. And so we have a couple different programs. Right now we have Back to School Backpacks in the Summer, which is a program where we help connect you with a school that with children in need who don't have the resources to be able to buy their own backpacks and school supplies. And so help connect you with the school and help connect you with backpacks and school supplies. And so that will be running in the summer months, May through September. Right now, for a few more days, we're running a program called Community Connections, where parishes can fill out an interest form, and then we have a grant through Chick-fil-A to gift money, a gift card to Chick-fil-A to provide food for a ministry in your area that you would like to serve with, and again, help with finding the ministry in the area. So those are two of our bigger programs right now. But yeah, I helping parishes find a way that works for them to serve in their own actual community, just that like makes me feel so full of joy. So I'm really grateful for this job. It was funny, like Katrina called me one day. I was like, hey, have you thought about working some more? So I was like, oh, I guess, I could do some work. So
yeah. No, it's great though. And it's true. I mean, I feel like, about 10 years ago, we all started thinking about in camps and youth ministry stuff. We're looking around, we're like, boy, we start doing a really good job with the kids. And then they're all pumped up and excited at the end of camp or at the end of a YES trip. And they're like, I want to go out and serve Jesus and serve the people. And I love everybody. And they get to their parish and the parish is like, they're like distracted and they're thinking about other things. And so the kids show up and they're like, let's do something amazing. And they're like, stop, we have a festival coming. Like we're doing this, we're doing that. Like, let's all, get back to work. And the kids just kind of get squashed. And it's it's so important to be like bringing in the parents a little bit and bringing in the parish a bit and getting them into a frame of mind so that when the kids come to them filled with all of this joy and excitement, so that they're like prepared to receive them and then move it forward. Because it's not even that they didn't want to. They just had no idea it was coming. Like, I remember our first Yes trip, we had this whole group of kids going to the parish council, asking to be able to do this and that. And like, parish council was like, what are you talking about? Get out of here. And it was just like, oh no, it was terrible. But because you don't want to teach them what it means to live the gospel and then make it look like, Orthodox people don't know how to live the gospel. That's
right. Or we don't have time, or we have other things going on.
We don't care.
Not a good look.
Care about that. Yeah, no, it's not nice. And it's not that we don't care, but it really is just like you can't get half the team.
Well, and sometimes parishes are right. And sometimes parishes are really good at writing a check or gathering donations or all that. Like, I've been in parishes where they were great at that, but that's not very meaningful for kids. Like, they're not the ones who are necessarily contributing the money. They don't have money of their own, really. So being able to find ways to serve that actually has some like meaning for them is really helpful. Like being able to have face-to-face interactions and to actually see the impact that they're having versus just raising money or collecting canned food drives that they don't ever get to see where those canned foods items actually go to.
Yeah, it really, so often, right? And because what you see in Yes is that it's the human connection that matters so much, and that Jesus wants you feeding people, or he even says like, you visited me when I was sick or in prison, right? Like, it's really not that you're feeding them, like keeping them alive, so much as it is that you're sharing a meal with them, that you're sitting with them. It's not so much just the soup kitchen, it's the conversation and the connection. And so often the stuff that we do with our kids, we just don't give them any of that.
Right. Absolutely. And those things are a lot harder. It's a lot easier to gather canned food, for somebody to drop off at your parish than it is to like organize a time to bring food and everybody sit down and be together. And it's harder. And so that's why local initiatives is here to help. So
yeah. That's neat. It's really neat. I like it too, because I feel like it's not like a program. It's not like you're going to send them a workbook and be like, go through this workbook and then you'll be fixed. But it's really much more personal than that, because you're just talking to them and kind of looking at their town and looking at their parish and sort of working it out and figuring out what would work in that circumstance. Because the thing is, we're all very different from each other, and we're in different kinds of towns and different places. It's just, I love it. I love that you're doing this. If somebody wanted to get their parish involved, what do they have to do to get you guys to just come help us figure it out?
They can just start by emailing me. So I would be able to connect them. So yeah, I don't know if you want my email address, but I can just
is there like a thing on yesnorthamerica.org? Is there like a thing they could click on? Or
yes, so it says parish opportunities, and you can click on parish opportunities and it will have all of the listed programs. We also have Bridges at Home, which is something that any parish can do, and it's a way to connect different generations within your parish. And the part of the philosophy behind that is the idea that a strong parish is the one that's able to then turn around and go out and serve in the world. But, if you don't know the people within your parish and your parish isn't very connected, it's going to be a lot harder for you to turn around and be able to have the support and the strength to go out and serve other people. So that's kind of Bridges at Home was made to support intergenerational relationships. So we have that on our website available for anybody who wants to do that. And so that's a great place to start. And then the different programs we run at different times of the year. But even if you just want to send an email, and I'd be happy to help with anything that your parish is wanting to do related to service.
Yeah, I feel like, if you go to the parish opportunities list and it's just too many options and you don't know what they are, just click on any of them and just be like, yeah, sign me up for that. They're just going to email you and ask you.
Yeah, my email address is at the bottom of most of them. So yeah,
it's just gonna go to Elizabeth's inbox, and she will help you sort it out. So if you sign up for the wrong one, she'll help you get over on the one that you needed. But
yep.
Yeah, I love the Bridges program. And I think, we really underestimate that. Years ago, I think we all sort of just thought like, oh, well, kids leave the church, young adults leave the church because of politics, or like, they don't like Christianity anymore or something like that. You know, they went to college and they learned to be
Hmm.
atheists or something.
Hmm.
And it's not really any of that. It's all about whether they feel connected. And, you
Right.
know, we have this habit of dividing everybody up all the time for ministries. And
Hmm.
it's nice. You know, you get all the teenagers together and you get all the old ladies together and you get all the old men together. That's great.
Hmm.
You have to have some ministries that bring everybody together because
Right.
you know, it's so valuable to have that intergenerational connection and to, you know, a lot of kids these days don't live anywhere near their grandparents or they don't have enough adult role models or, you know, young adults and college students move to a new parish and their aunts aren't there and their grandma's not there. And so, you know, they
Hmm.
need some honorary
Yeah.
family members to step up. So it's really neat. The Bridges program, I love that.
Hmm.
I love that very much. It's really cool. Well, I love all the work that you do. It's really neat because I feel like, Elizabeth, you had this set of skills from the child life specialist work that you
Hmm.
did. And that was already kind of building on like a natural interest and a natural talent. But you developed this set and then all of a sudden you brought it to the church and you
Hmm.
started applying it to the church and you're like changing the way that your parish does Sunday school and you're thinking about yes and you're trying to get parishes connected and I just it's so lovely. You know, you just never know. I think when God sends us different places, we pick up different skills and we don't know it, but we're going to need them for the next chapter. You know,
Yes.
like he was like, here's your suitcase, Elizabeth. And he's just putting all these tools in it and you don't even know why. And there it is. You have it
Exactly.
all
Yeah.
right
I mean,
there.
one of the things that I was like thinking about was when I was 10, I started working at a mother's helper, which I'm like, I don't know how hopeful I really was, but I started working as a helper for a woman who had a young child with autism. And I did that for 8 years from the time I was 10 until I graduated high school and
Wow.
got to really form that relationship, but also learn so much about special needs and autism and stuff. And so then that led me to in college, I worked with a man with cerebral palsy. And then and so I feel like, yes, I didn't know it at the time, but now looking back as like almost 40, like, oh my gosh, like God had this plan. He had these things, these opportunities that came into my life that did have like shaped so many of the things that I've been able to do as an adult. And it's really just incredible to look back and see that.
It really is. It's wonderful. And it's neat because with your story, I feel like I can just see all of the pieces that just kind of come together. And it's like, oh,
Mhm.
and that's what you're doing now. Of course it is. Because it's like, it's just sort of the next step in really how to nurture people, young people, but all
Mhm.
the people, nurture them
Mhm.
all, take care of all of them. And it is interesting because so much, when we say like, it's striking me, I'm saying take care of the people. I'm talking about parishes doing service. I'm not referring to the people in your community who needed the coats or the food or whatever. I'm talking about the parish is so much
Mhm.
healthier and more beautiful and more wonderful when it's energized by this kind of service
Mhm.
mentality and by loving one
Yes.
another and really seeing each other.
Mhm.
God, what good work. What good work you're doing. It's really, what a blessing. That's
Yeah, thank God.
Thank God. Well, Elizabeth, it's so delightful to get to talk to you. And I'll see you again tomorrow because we have
Yeah.
a meeting tomorrow.
See you soon.
We'll be getting together to work on more of this stuff. But thank you so much for coming and joining us tonight. This is great.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really delightful.
Well, great. And thank you to our audience for joining us. And come back next Sunday night and we'll meet another Everyday Orthodox Christian. We'll see you then.